Revisiting how to use the separated countermeasures in War Thunder. Hello guys, once again it's Matt. Thank you all the members and patrons. Make sure to subscribe, and today I wanted to actually make a video revisiting how you actually is supposed to be actually using the actual new mechanic of the update that we got today, which is separated flares and chaff. So the first thing that you have to understand is that it is still work in progress. So there are tanks, not tanks, aircraft that are still work in progress on that regard. The MLD was one, for example. Now no, I don't think they fixed it yet. It's kind of weird, but yeah, the MLD, for example, the MiG-23s in general, they're not really ready yet. For example, there are some other bugs. Like, for example, the Mirage is kind of bugged still. It says that it will have 48 that it's bound to be chaff, but those are just not existent right now. So it's kind of bugged right now, okay, guys? So it should be fixed very, very soon. But with that out of the way, how do you use it? Well, the first thing that you have to understand is that there are two ways of deploying flare separately, okay? We're gonna show to you guys in the controls. So you go into the controls and you search this switch. So the first one is actually having a button to deploy countermeasures and then another button to switch between the countermeasure type, okay? So for example, I added one just for a test here. So you will have the normal fire countermeasure button over here. You can have it as whatever you want. I'm gonna add it as no, I need another button that I'm not using here. Hover mode, I don't care about hover mode. So yeah, you have a button to fire the countermeasures and a button to switch countermeasure. This is the first way, okay? So let's just go to the test flight to test it out. We are using the Su-27, and after I let you know how to use it, I will actually explain how you actually choose how many of each you're gonna use, okay? So again, you chose a button to switch between the modes and then a button to fire the countermeasure that you chose. So if you take a look on the left side of the flares and chaff, right up there in the HUD, you can see that there is a little like line, horizontal line, okay? If you click the button to switch between the countermeasure types, you will notice that down there it appears like flare release mode, for example, and then the flare appears right up there in the as the horizontal line, right? If you choose again chaff release mode, and then it goes to the chaff up there. If you click again, it's both flares, chaff, both flares, chaff, both. So here you can basically choose, I want to fire flares, for example, and then you click the button to fire countermeasures and it's only firing flare. If I choose chaff, it will only fire chaff. If I choose both, it will fire both. Okay, this is the first way. It's the more easier way, but at the same time is the less competitive way. Why? Because in certain situations you will need to actually deploy a certain amount of countermeasures of a certain type very quickly, and you have to keep clicking here to actually choose between them and stuff. Oh, I need a flare, okay. Radar missile, oh my god, I need to click again, and then, you know, it takes time. This takes time and it makes you die, as you saw if you saw my first video of the day today, or second video, I don't remember, but still. So I honestly don't like this idea of using this type as a competitive mode, especially for top tier, okay? The second way is actually having a button for one and to the other. So you can go to controls here, you go to flare, and then you will have a button for flares, and then chaff, and have a different button for chaff, okay? If you do this, you can fire flares with one button, as you see, only flares, and then chaff with a second button, making sure that you are actually choosing the correct type of countermeasure that you want, okay? This is very, very helpful, especially for top tier, that you need to choose between the two of them. For example, me, I have two side buttons in my mouse, so I use them, one for flare and one for chaff, and I think I can choose between them very quickly because I just click them, you know. So it's a lot quicker and a lot more competitive, I think, to stay alive, okay? But before we wrap it up, last thing that I wanted to talk about is that each battle that you get in, before you get to the battle, you will have this little box appearing, okay? And here is basically a box of how many flares in CHAFF you want to choose, right? So you can just move around over here or click it right here, and you can choose. Since CHAFF, it is going to be generally less used, you know, if you don't have a lot of countermeasures, I would have something like this, because then you can be really effective with your CHAFF, and with the flares you can be a little bit more loose, and with the IR missiles they are a little bit more dangerous because you don't know that they're coming towards you, right? So with the CHAFF you can actually be a little bit more effective. And remember, CHAFF only works really when you are in a cold kind of aspect, you know, you have the CHAFF between the missile and you, or the radar of the enemy and you, right? This is where the CHAFF really works. There's other situations, but in general, it's the best way. So it's not every single time that you have to use a CHAFF, right? It's in certain situations. So if you don't have a lot of CHAFF, you can do that. There are certain things that you have to worry about as well, depending on the aircraft, okay, guys? So for example, the F4s, the new F4s, they have a different amount of chaff and flares depending on the size of the actual countermeasure. So for example, you can see right there that these are the larger ones, these are the smaller ones. So you have an option of using large countermeasures and small countermeasures, right? And you can choose between the two. So if you take a look on test flight over here, you can choose between the larger ones and the smaller ones. How do you know it's the large and the small? The large you take normally less, but you can check it out before, you know. So for example here I know 30 is the number of large, 60 is the number of small. It would be helpful if they actually add here large countermeasures, small countermeasures, but still I know it's large because it's 60 of the large ones, and then of the small ones, and then 30 of the large ones, right? And with this you can mix around. For example, I want a more powerful flare, for example, in this situation, so I would use 30 flares over here, and here you can choose, I don't know, I want this ones. It will be a mixed match. To be honest, if it's realistic, it would be somewhat similar to this in real life, you know. They would use the larger flares, the larger for the flares, and the smaller ones for the chaff, because I think chaffs are smaller in the size of them that it can actually fit and stuff, but still it would be similar to that. But you can choose between the two and have different types of flares and chaff working on the aircraft. Another aircraft that has this, for example, it's the F5E, right? It has 10 large countermeasures and then 30 smaller ones, right? So you can, you can go to the test flight and see that you can choose between the large and smaller ones. So I don't know if you want, I mean, for example, here you can only have flares apparently on the smaller ones, so you cannot choose between the chaff and the flare. So in this case I would probably take something like this, because I cannot take any chaff over here in this pod, but in this one I can, right? So I would take 10 chaff over here and 30 flare here. So depending on the aircraft that you go fly, it will have different types of countermeasures and different types of way of dealing with it. For example, here is another one that you can actually choose on the F-14 internally. You can choose, and then in the BOL, I think this is the BOL pods, right? Many aircraft that have the BOL and stuff will have it like this. So just bear that in mind, okay, when you are actually choosing a flare and countermeasure pod and stuff, it will be a little bit different, okay, guys? And it is quite interesting, I gotta be honest. The way that they added, it's pretty realistic, because you have to choose between the the weights that you are using. For example, here the MiG-21, it needs to use the actual pod of countermeasures. If you don't use it, it will not appear for you to actually use, right? And then you can go here and choose what types you want, right? So you need to take the pod in your loadout to actually make it work. So a lot of these aircraft will work like this, okay? And again, there are many aircraft that are a little bit bugged yet, you know, you have to think about that. But yeah, here's another one that it's a little bit different. You have to choose between the two pods. So just remember that, okay, before you actually go to a battle, because it means a little bit. You have to have the loadouts ready. And basically this is how you use the separated chaff and flare countermeasures. It is very helpful. Learn how to use it. It is very, very good. You know, if you choose 2 buttons, you can be very, very efficient with the way that you drop your countermeasures, and with that you can actually be a lot more survivable, basically, because you can choose whenever dropping, and dropping the correct amount, and of course the correct type of countermeasures, making you save the other type that you don't need at that time for after, when you might need it, right? So it's a lot more effective. Especially, I mean, these aircraft that have like 300, 400, 700 countermeasures kind of doesn't mean much, but for example, for an aircraft such as a MiG-23M, for example, that only has like 12, it means a lot, because you can actually like save a little bit of flare, a little bit of chaff, depending on the situation that you are in. So a lot more effective, right? But basically this is it. I hope the video was not too tedious, but I really wanted to show to you guys how to use this new mechanic, because I saw some people having troubles with it. It is a little bit confusing, but it is what it is. I see you guys on the next one. Make sure to subscribe, and bye guys.